I'm Darren Morton.
I'm Simon Matthews. This is Lift,
The lifestyle medicine podcast where we dive into the science of health and well-being.
Hello, Professor Morton. Nice to be back with you again.
Lovely to be back with you, Simon. How is life in Madrid?
Life in Madrid is wonderful. Still winter, of course, so mornings are just maybe 2 or 3 degrees. But the days are lovely, blue skies. If you walk down to the Royal Palace, which is about maybe not quite 10 minutes from where I live, if you walk down to the Royal Palace and stand at the back of the palace, then you're looking out to the northwest of Madrid in the direction of an ancient city called Segovia, which was occupied by the Romans for a long time, and also the city of Valladolid, which has twice been the capital of Spain historically as well. So you're sort of looking in that direction, but you can still see snow on the mountain range between Madrid and those places.
I am certain that you tell this stuff to me just to make me feel bad, because literally in one of our other podcasts, you're talking about going and seeing the art display. You know, the royal house or whatever. And I was thinking to myself, what did I do yesterday? Oh, that's right, I mowed the lawn. I mowed the lawn in Kurrenbong, and you were there. You know. Anyway, moving right along.
It was it was pretty nice. It was pretty nice. So, Madrid right now is lovely. Thank you. Darren, we had a lovely piece of correspondence from a listener recently.
Yes, we did.
And this listener, Kristen, hello, thank you. This listener is actually a former student of mine as well, a former coaching student who's now successfully. She has been successfully certified as a health and wellbeing coach for some time now. But she sent this after a recent episode. I just had to tell you this. I listened to the Lift podcast that talked about Parkruns. I loved the idea of that so much, and I had never heard of it prior to your podcast. So I emailed the Parkrun organisation and set up a virtual meeting with them. I am now collaborating with someone from where I live, and we're going to bring a Parkrun here.
Yay! Well done. Well done.
I love the community aspect of it, she says. So thank you.
Beautiful. Fantastic. I was actually, for the first time last weekend, I was the run director of our local parkrun. So it's an awesome thing. So, yeah, well done. Love to hear stories like that. Fantastic.
It's fantastic, isn't it? So run director, does that mean you point at people and say, you, run faster?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you're allowed to sort of tap them with sticks and stuff like that. I'm only joking. No, we're there to encourage and cheer.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great piece of feedback. So thank you again, Kristen, both for listening and for your enthusiasm to get Parkrun going in your local area. Darren, I thought we might talk today. We spoke recently about the idea of grit, and what grit is, and how and why we might apply it in our lives. And it got me thinking more about the whole idea of the adversities, the challenges, the crises, the uncertainties that are just, a routine part of daily life. You don't have to be pursuing something extraordinary to face those sorts of difficulties and challenges in daily life. And I got to wondering about, the whole role of lifestyle medicine in all of that, which we'll come to shortly. But in relation to those sorts of events which we can all encounter, Darren, the end of 2024 for you was a little like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was glad for the end of 2024, to be honest. Actually, the last half of last year, like my father's been, I'm really close to my father, and he's actually grown quite unwell. And so it's been hard to see. But then we actually lost 2 really good friends in the last few weeks before Christmas. So much so that 2 days before Christmas, I actually had to take the eulogy of a friend of mine who's an older friend, but he was a really good confidant and a bit of a mentor in some way. He was actually my first ever PhD student as well, and he'd made a huge contribution in the lifestyle medicine space. So yeah, really hard. And I actually remember it was like 2 days before Christmas. Just we'd had his funeral, and I just felt completely deflated and depleted. I just had nothing left. And for me, it was interesting. For me, the way I recharge is I get out in the ocean and I do some sort of wind or water sport. And so I went out. I'm into wing foiling. Look it up if you've never heard of it. It's a lot of fun. And I went down there, and I remember just feeling really flat. I went down to the beach, went out my wing foil, out in the ocean there, and I was out quite a ways, and then just did something silly that, probably because I wasn't in a great headspace anyway, turned a bit wrong, fell and landed across my board, and cut a long story short, broke 3 ribs. And I actually remember I was out in the water, just sort of holding on the edge of the board thinking, oh, this is just like too much. And I sort of limped back into shore, and then you have that period after. I don't know if you've ever broken ribs before, but I've done it several times now, and it's not fun. It doesn't get easier. You don't get better at breaking ribs, or certainly recovering from them. But it was just the whole thing. From then you can't sleep properly, and it's so yeah. I got to the end of 2024 just feeling very, very flat and under-resourced, really, to sort of move forward.
Yeah. So, Darren, what I'm hearing in all of that is that your experience of that back part of last year, particularly towards the very end of the year, ended up feeling a bit like a downward spiral.
Yeah, absolutely.
The more that happened, the more it seemed to deplete, and even the things intended to try and top up the tank, themselves became challenges and difficulties.
Yeah. And I think for me too, and we might talk about this, I'm sure, I'm interested in where this conversation goes, but for me, there was almost an instant awareness as soon as I'd done this thing. I thought, I know that I'm not going to be able to, because I can't, it's been, 6 weeks or so now, and I'm still nursing my ribs. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to access those strategies that I would typically go to in order to stay buoyed. So it was quite surprising to me how quickly that thought came to me, like, oh no, I actually need this stuff now, and I'm not going to be able to do this. So that was quite an interesting insight for me.
Yeah. So here's my question for you. In the face of those sorts of events, which are, for you at least, were combinations of physical injury and emotional strain and grief and loss, what if anything do lifestyle medicine and positive psychology have to offer, do you think?
Yeah, these are really, this is really pragmatic, isn't it? Like, this is where the rubber meets the road. And look, I think for me, maybe it speaks to what I just mentioned a moment ago. That whole idea of movement is, my body needs a lot of movement. That's always been a go-to to me. And outside and getting in the water and natural environments and sporting, adventure, all that stuff is part of lifestyle medicine. It's core part of lifestyle medicine for me. Where the challenge arises is when you're prohibited from doing that or constrained because of, in this case, it was actual injury. I did find myself, and look, my wife might say differently, that I wasn't that pleasant to live with, but I was certainly very, very intentional about the positive psychology aspect of it. And I think for me, it was focusing on things like, when this gets better, I'm going to do this, so
Uh-huh.
so sort of eliciting hope for myself,
Okay.
like
Okay.
not losing that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
excitement that this will get better.
Yeah.
I've had these injuries before. Yeah, you're just going to have to, for the next X number of weeks, it's going to be a bit challenging. And then also I found myself intentionally trying to say, this could be a whole lot worse. I think about, and so there was that sort of trying to
So
reframe, I
perspective
suppose.
taking. Yeah, yeah.
Perspective
Yeah.
taking became a pretty
Yeah.
important part of it for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once again, I'm not saying I get all this all right, because I reckon there was certainly times when my wife would have been going, "Hey, practice what you preach."
Yeah.
But I was certainly, trying to perspective take, trying to realize there's a whole lot of good and looking for that, things that I was grateful for. Gratitude plays a big part in my life. I certainly try to do that. I try to be intentional around that. So it was interesting. As I was less able to do the lifestyle medicine-y stuff, I sort of was defaulting more, or trying to move towards the things I could do, and that is exercise my brain in positive ways. So the positive psychology strategies.
I love that. So part of it was hanging on to a belief that this wasn't permanent, that things would be different, and experienced, and you would experience them in better ways in the future. That was part of it, and also the perspective exercise, which I love. I used to often when I do organisational training around things like grit and resilience and so on, I do a perspective taking exercise with people where I invite them to think about something that's happened that's really frustrated or got them down in some way, and sometimes people will come up with things like things that are personal and meaningful to us, like I'd been waiting weeks for a package to be delivered, and when it was delivered, the item was broken, so I had to return it, and blah blah blah. It's without doubt a frustrating event. And then I invite people to rate that, in severity, and people say, it's like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. Then I ask them to imagine a scale that goes from 0 to 100, where 0 represents minor inconvenience. You plan to pull into a parking spot, someone pulls in before you, so you have to drive 3 spots further down the road to find somewhere to park.
Yeah.
At the 100 end is an irreversible, life-altering event for the worse.
Yeah.
Then I invite them to rescale their original estimate of that event, and typically, people scale it right back and say, "Oh, actually, now it's about a 1 out of 10 when I think about it that way."
Yeah.
So that perspective taking exercise in itself, I think, is very valuable. It's like kind of zooming out from the immediacy of our own world, and being able to see ourselves as part of a much bigger picture.
It makes me think. I remember waking up on the morning of September 11, and I had some stuff that I was a bit worried about, it was sort of featuring in my headspace. I was taking a lot of real estate up there. And then someone said, "Hey, turn the TV on." And I remember turning it on, and just all of a sudden my jaw dropped. I sat on the couch, sofa there in front of the television. I didn't move for 4 hours, just watching these updates. And all of a sudden that other thing that was taking up this huge room was just like... there's definitely a value to that perspective piece, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of interesting elements in there too that I guess extend a little bit beyond positive psychology. One that comes to mind is that idea that you expressed of hope about things being different. This is one of the principles of the school that we call appreciative inquiry, which is a fascinating field of study that emerged 40 or so years ago. And it emerged actually in the context of organisational change. So the David Cooperrider, who's acknowledged really as the author of this field or this school of thought, was conducting studies about an organisation, and I guess maybe to some extent a root cause analysis of what was going on in this organisation and what could be done to fix it. And in the midst of all of that, he kind of had this this light bulb moment of saying to himself, hang on, there's a bunch of things that are actually going well here. What would happen if I turned my mind and started looking at those? Mm. That gave rise to the field of appreciative inquiry. But one of the elements of appreciative inquiry is the idea of holding the belief that there's something valuable or worthwhile ahead. There's something valuable or worthwhile in the future. And just holding that belief, of course, has a tremendous influence then on how we choose to act in the present. Yeah. If you sincerely believe that that something good, subjectively good, lies ahead, then that will have an influence on what you do right now.
On everything. As you're speaking, I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl, and he wrote that short book, Man's Search for Meaning. And for those who don't know the story of Viktor Frankl, a Austrian, I believe, psychiatrist who was caught up in the horrors of Nazi Germany. He was in Auschwitz, one of the death camps there, and because he was a doctor, he basically became a caregiver to other patients, and he has this really fascinating paragraph in that book where he said that a disproportionate number of people, of prisoners in the death camp, died between Christmas Day and New Year's in 1944. And he said, and he wondered what it was. He said, because it's not like the rations had changed. There'd been no weather conditions hadn't changed. They weren't that variable. It wasn't like their work conditions had changed. There'd been no flu or influenza or virus go around the camp. And he said, and then it dawned on him. He said, you see, we'd heard rumours that the Allies were coming, and for months before that, we all thought we'd be home by Christmas. We'd be liberated by Christmas. And his conclusion was that, literally when there wasn't that, when hopes were dashed, the people perished. Like, hope is literally life-giving. And I think it speaks into that whole idea of, having some positive expectation, something to look forward to. For me, it is. It's life-giving.
Lift is supported by the Lift Project, an educational adventure where you learn science-based ways to lift your mood and your life. The Lift Project is lifting lives around the globe, in healthcare settings, workplaces, schools, universities and communities. To find out more, visit theliftproject.global.
And here's a really interesting reflection on all of that. There's a difference, isn't there, between you thinking that for yourself, you thinking to yourself, this is difficult, this is challenging, but I'm confident that this will change. And someone coming along and saying to you, it's okay, Darren, things will get better.
Yeah.
There's a significant difference between those two things, isn't there? And I wonder what we can learn from that difference. What do you think?
I think obviously you have to be ready for it. It's like anything to discover it for yourself, to be in a position, because it can actually go the opposite way. Like sometimes it's the last thing that you want to hear from someone is some just sort of flippant, like, move on, think positively. It
ends up being toxic positivity, doesn't it?
Toxic, yes. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah. It kind of it's an effort at positivity that disregards the challenge and the difficulty and the reality. And simply seeks to pretend something
So when should we push for that though? When should we introduce that? If we're trying to encourage someone else, at what point? There's the Eeyore. I think it's one of what's the books.
Oh, yeah.
And he has this great quote. Winnie the Pooh. When he has this great quote, he says, "I don't mind suffering in silence as long as everyone knows I'm suffering in silence." And I think to what extent do you, if people are sort of suffering along there in their misery, to what extent should you try and encourage them out of that, or is it appropriate to do so? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if I were to come and visit you at your house just after you've mown your lawn in Kurrambong, if I were to come and visit you, would you push a cup of tea in front of me and force me to drink it? Clearly, you wouldn't. That you would be much more likely to say, "Could I offer you something to drink? Tea, coffee, water, whatever." But somehow many of us internalise the idea that we should push positivity into people. And I think the lesson we can take from that is a lesson of approaching this in the same way that we might approach offering someone something to drink, instead of just saying, "Well, things will get better." To first of all acknowledge what the person is experiencing, and secondly ask. I mean, you don't ask it exactly this way, but essentially asking, "Would you like a different perspective? Would you like me to offer another perspective here?" Before simply dropping. Exactly right. But perhaps that's in the same way as someone might say, "Actually, I don't want tea, coffee, or water right now. I'm good as I am."
I've been quite interested in the work of Mel Robbins, and she's I don't know the title of the new book that's coming out, but she's the one that's sort of given rise to this whole idea of the let them theory, and it's the whole idea of, what she said, I was a control freak and I just wanted, and I'm worried about this going wrong and that person making that bad decision, but at some point, we just got to go, let them, and maybe that relates to this scenario as well. We don't really have a right to dictate someone else's journey, and maybe
interestingly, that at some point, I think is often way sooner than we think it is.
Yes,
that at some point is really the first point. That's when we ought to be allowing people to choose. And in fact, we see this, in lifestyle medicine and the areas of behaviour change generally. This is what we observe all the time. When if we direct or instruct people to do something without really understanding what matters to them, then really what we do is activate people's autonomy defences. We all value the idea of being able to choose what we do. That we value the idea of freedom of choice, doing what's important to us, doing what's consistent with our values. It's very easy to demonstrate for yourself. Think back to a time when you were asked to do something that conflicted with a value that you have, and your immediate response would have been to push back against that and say, "No, I don't want to do it." So the time to do this, of course, is right up front, and first understand the person's values, understand their own frame of reference, understand what they want, and then find ways to support them, rather than simply stepping in and saying, "Well, have you thought about this, or you should do this, or try doing that," which can be done with the very best of intentions, but
just not welcome.
Not with the best of outcomes.
No, the writing reflex. Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say, this conversation is going in the direction of we all have tough times, and if we're not in the midst of one, we probably are close to someone who is. And what's the role of positive psychology and lifestyle medicine in the midst of those times? And so that from a positive psychology point of view, there's still real value in that. Like I I would attest that this is really, really helpful to me. But would I want someone pushing that upon me? Probably not. Having an invitation, or to be able to move into that space, yeah, I think I'm up for that. But yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. What about from a lifestyle medicine perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm going to ask you another question now, which will help frame this up, I think.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the practice of gratitude and hope that you shared before, if they weren't part of your life, if the principles of lifestyle medicine weren't part of your life, good diet, plenty of sunshine, exercise activity, social connection, so on.
Yeah.
How differently do you think you might have responded to those events in the second half of last year?
Yeah, terribly. And I often, I would actually, say that within the positive psychology space, having sense of purpose and meaning is a really integral part of that as well. And as a package, all of these tools that sort of lifestyle medicine and positive psychology offer, they're just lifelines to me. Like I honestly, I really feel for people that don't have those sorts of reservoirs and experiences with them. I think that I can find myself being a lot more positive about moving forward because I know from experience that these have worked for me in the past. So it's almost like you've got this little toolkit there. And what I find is that you got this toolkit, these collective strategies from lifestyle medicine, positive psych. And sometimes you can't take that particular tool out, So for me, the first thing I'm reaching out for is let's get active, let's go outdoors. And sometimes I can't reach for those ones. And so, you try and sort of scramble around for the other ones instead that might be not your default, might be your number one go-to. But I still know, I know the evidence. I know the science that these things can be helpful. I've played with all of them. I know that, they have their relative merit. So, yeah, I honestly, I feel for, to be honest, Simon, this is why I'm so passionate about sharing this stuff because, I think that we want people to know that these things can really help in meaningful ways, not just in the good times, but in the bad times as well. So I think it's of paramount importance to me. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing in all of that is that one of the real values of lifestyle medicine and positive psychology is not simply as a repair kit when something difficult or challenging happens, but to build and develop these as part of who we are and part of how we live our lives daily, because they then act as defences and buffers and preventative mechanisms as well.
Yes.
We're less likely to experience the depths that we might experience if we've got a solid basis of those things.
Yes. Yeah. Certainly that would be my impression.
Yeah. The role in particular of you've mentioned meaning and purpose as one part of that, and meaning and purpose kind of it sort of straddles both positive psychology and lifestyle medicine, and in fact, I think it's probably fair to say that over the last few years that you and I have been involved in lifestyle medicine. Two particular shifts I've observed are, first of all, the role of behavioural change is becoming much more noticeable in the field of lifestyle medicine. And secondly, the role of meaning, purpose and spirituality is becoming much more noticeable in the field of lifestyle medicine.
I think it's a great observation, and I would agree with that. I think that what's happened is that as the science of the staples, the pillars of lifestyle medicine, nutrition, physical activity, have become more and more well established. Really, the interest is, how do we get people to do it? And so that's why I think the behavior change, the health coaching, I think that's where that's playing a really valuable role there. But I think the other dawning has been, okay, we know that people are not eating that great and they're not moving that much and they're sleeping poorly. but what are the drivers of that? So I think there's been a tendency to start looking further upstream, and that's where I think that we see, the more interest and attention on meaning, purpose, even those notions of spirituality. So and I'm encouraged by that. I mean, it was actually, it was during COVID, I think it was 2021, that I did a presentation at the ACLM conference, and I actually titled it that, Meaning, a key upstream driver of chronic disease, because the evidence is very, very strong evidence, and maybe we can do a whole a podcast on that sometime. But yeah, I think that and it relates to you've been talking already about the idea of our values, what's important to us, what sort of alignment do we have to those things. It plays a huge role in determining not just our life, satisfaction and joy in the good times, but our resilience and our ability to weather the storms in life as well in the not good times.
There's one particular aspect of the lifestyle medicine pie that I want to focus on here before we finish up, and it's the role that social connection plays in all of this. I 6 years ago, nearly 6 years ago, I had a spontaneous and quite sudden retinal detachment in my left eye, followed 6 months later by the same thing in my right eye. Yeah, and I was very fortunate. I had a superb surgeon who successfully, reattached the retina on both occasions with very, very sort of minimal change to my vision. The only real change I've got now is that sometimes straight lines don't quite look straight. If I look at a very fine line on a piece of paper, it just wiggles a little bit, and that's really just that's down the line of the tear in the retina, where things don't quite.
Right.
So I was very fortunate. But the consequence of that, the consequence of retinal surgery, was that I then developed cataracts very, very quickly. Within a period of 6 to 8 months. Cataracts typically take years to develop. Mine developed in months, and then I had subsequent surgery again to get bionic lenses in my eyes. And so now my vision is fantastic. But at the time, my observation was, first of all, as the cataracts were developing, my life was closing in around me. I could do fewer and fewer things, and it crept up bit by bit. I became less confident about driving at night because I couldn't see so well at night. I became less confident about driving in rainy weather because the rain kind of obscured things. It became more difficult to. I couldn't go to the cinema because I simply couldn't see. I just couldn't see that far. I ended up not even being able to read very well by the time I had my cataract surgery. I had to get super close to the computer. I had to wear contact lenses underneath my glasses just to be able to see clearly. So it had this really quite significant impact on my capacity to function in daily life, and also had a huge impact on my self-confidence. Of course, the more you experience changes like this, the more your confidence declines. The less you feel able to just do things and able to function well. And my lifeline in all of that was social connection. Just knowing that there were people around me. And when I think back now, I just can't imagine what it would have been like to have to face that alone, to have to manage all of that without without my wife, without my kids, without friends and professional colleagues and so on, to whom I was deeply connected all through that.
Yeah.
So I think social connection plays a really, really significant role in the face of adversity for all of us.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, over the last, I shared my story for what's been going on for me, but I've been incredibly encouraged by how many people have just checked in with me, to be honest, and just said, "How you doing? How you doing?" Like, and it's been a bit affronting for me because normally I'm the one that's sort of trying to prop other people up, and it's been quite eye-opening. But I tell you what, people need so little encouragement. Like it's a little encouragement goes so far. It's remarkable, and it's been quite a challenge for me to think, wow, you know what, that meant the world to me for someone just to go a little bit out of their way, and it might not have been a deep, connection, or not like it's an intimate friend or necessarily, but it's been a challenge to me to just to sort of go that extra mile to try and reach out a little bit more, just to offer those words of encouragement to people, because it matters, and you don't know what sort of challenges they're facing at that particular time. So
I think
I agree.
It's a great place to finish our conversation, actually, Darren. And I think it reminds us that if we're talking about ourselves, then positive psychology and lifestyle medicine have a very clear role to play. We know that the practices of lifestyle medicine act as a buffer or a defense against the impact of the inevitably adverse events that we're going to face in our lives. Having those mindsets of hope about the future, of gratitude, and so on, again, can form a similar defence, if you like, against those things, and help us to process and move through those events. Not necessarily more quickly, not necessarily even more easily, but just with a confidence that we'll get through them. When it comes to someone else, though, the formula's a little bit different. And the formula is much more like, I think, what you just shared. And that formula begins with, how are you doing? And what might I be able to offer that could be useful to you?
I love that.
I think it's important not to, if it's someone else, not to try and push lifestyle medicine approaches or push positive psychology approaches onto someone. But first of all, see and hear that person, and seek to understand that person's experience, and then be curious about what might be useful to them, and then be prepared to offer those elements if they happen to be useful to that person at that time.
Yeah, very wise and challenging words, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Darren, thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate that.
And I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting better. I'm on the up. So next session will be all guns blazing again. Yeah.
So are you 3 ribs still 6 ribs, or are they back to 3 ribs?
I think they're back to 3 ribs. Yeah.
Back to 3 ribs.
I'm definitely. I still can't sleep on my side, but I have been a little bit naughty and been in the water a couple of times. But cut the session short, just so that we don't redo anything that shouldn't be redone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing your story, which I think gave us all an opportunity to understand, more deeply the role that positive psychology and lifestyle medicine can play for all of us in all of our lives. Sure. And it goes without saying, of course, that I wish you a very happy, prosperous, and fruitful 2025.
Ditto, brother. Ditto.
Lift is presented by Simon Matthews and Darren Morton. It's sponsored by the Lift Project and supported by Avondale University. Music provided by Pixabay. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear more about, send us an email to podcast@theliftproject.global. The Lift Project. Lift your mood, lift your life.